That was a win for Team Judge, right? The judge did reveal, yes, you must give this information over. Not enough people are talking about this shady maneuver that could mess up the whole thing for Blake and potentially send her to jail?
Oh, Hollywood showdown like no other. Blake Lively just got hit with what may be the most devastating moment of her legal battle. In a courtroom packed with tension, a judge finally issued a scathing rebuke that not only exposed her legal team's strategy, but may have shattered her carefully controlled public image. And the twist: Justin Baldoni wasn't alone this time. Content creators, witnesses, and even insiders came forward, all pointing to the same shocking truth. Blake Lively's legal tactics had crossed a line. So what triggered this final blow? And how did the entire courtroom end up rallying behind Baldoni? You're about to find out.
So basically, in September, Blake, I'm going through my notes, Blake filed this John Doe lawsuit in New York under a shell entity called Van Zandt Inc., which had no defendant on it, used vague language. 4 days later after that, they issued a subpoena via this shell corporation to Jennifer Abel's former publicist, Stephanie Jones, and her PR firm Jones Work, seeking communications with It Ends With Us. The case and subpoena flew under the radar, didn't notify Jennifer Abel, didn't notify anybody. It was all just anonymous John Does. It triggered sharp criticism from Friedman, Justin's attorney, saying it was an abuse of process, that her counsel was using hidden corporate shields to evade transparency. Now, this is what yielded those text messages from Jennifer Abel, and then got it into the New York Times. These, we can bury everybody. We can bury anyone. The plan to destroy Lively. These are the texts that are the crux of the retaliation campaign. But the question is, was that phone, were these texts legitimately obtained, right? And now it's under intense scrutiny now that a lot of people, sleuths of people, figured out it was subpoenaed via this John Doe anonymous lawsuit labeled to a corporation called Van Zandt. Is that a fair summary of where we are at this point up to now?
That's a pretty good summary, actually. Yeah, that's pretty good.
So why is this such a problem for Blake? Why was that so shady? I guess, can we start there? What is the legal issues with what Blake actually did there? Before we talk about the bigger ramifications, everything else, can you break that down a little more deeper?
Yeah, so to the extent when they shook her down and they cornered her in that office and they demanded her cell phone and they had these security guards there and they escorted her out the building and they have her stuff, they were entitled to have whatever business communications they had on that phone. What they were not entitled to do was go into her personal accounts, obtain cloud information, steal her personal communications, that tipped them off to the fact that Friedman was potentially gearing up for a civil extortion lawsuit against them and use it for future litigation against them. That is potentially illegally obtained. That could lead to breach of fiduciary duties. There a number of other crimes. We're a long way from her potentially going to jail. I'm not sure how you get to implicate Blake Lively into going to jail on the basis of those facts just yet. But to the extent that those personal communications were illegally obtained, and I think that they know that they were, because there's no other reason to file this sham lawsuit. What they're essentially doing is trying to take illegally obtained stuff and give it color of law. Basically launder the evidence in a way that they could use in this lawsuit. And you saw them reference in Blake Lively's initial complaint and then again in her amended complaint, these communications that were obtained by this weird subpoena that is the subject of the Van Sham thing. And so they issue this subpoena that names no defendant in a breach of contract case, which is problematic because if I make a contract with you, Andy, the parties are you and me, and then other parties might be whoever might be affected. There's never a scenario where I make a contract with some invisible entity.
It all started with what seemed like a routine cross-examination. Blake Lively's legal team entered the courtroom appearing calm, confident, and ready to dismantle the evidence presented by Justin Baldoni's lawyers. But within moments, the atmosphere began to change. What the defense thought would be a quick rebuttal turned into a slow unraveling of their credibility. Baldoni's legal team, meticulous and methodical, didn't just present claims. They backed everything up with documents, witness statements, and time-stamped evidence that painted a drastically different picture. Emails exchanged between parties were time-stamped and verified by court-certified records. A subpoena, previously denied by Blake's team, was not only real but had been received, reviewed, and acknowledged internally, as proven by leaked internal memos. And then came the bombshell testimony. A witness, once thought to be neutral, took the stand and confirmed Justin's version of events with alarming clarity. They even noted that Blake's team had made efforts to minimize or omit specific pieces of communication, pieces that now stood at the center of the case. The room tensed. Court staff exchanged glances. Those watching from the gallery leaned in closer. Even the judge took note, scribbling down comments rapidly while glancing toward the defense bench. For Blake, who had built a reputation on grace and poise, the pressure was visible. She leaned toward her attorney, whispering in rapid tones, clearly unsettled by how quickly the proceedings had turned against her. Outside the courtroom, real-time updates flooded social media. Legal journalists used words like unraveling and catastrophic shift. Reddit threads blew up with theories. Hashtags calling out Blake's legal strategy began trending. The case had started as a dispute, but now it was turning into a spectacle, and not in Blake's favor. By the end of that session, one thing was certain. The courtroom had shifted. Momentum now rested with Justin Baldoni, whose team continued delivering blow after blow, armed not with drama, but with hard proof.
The fact that there were no named defendants, they didn't have to notify anybody other than basically Abel, who, I guess she complied with the subpoena. She gave what she had. I don't know if she had the opportunity to consult with her own attorneys or not. Probably not. I think that would have been objected to like 5 ways to Sunday had it landed in the hands of any attorney. That's an easy motion to quash. So they don't notify anybody relevant to the case, and they just get this information, and now they could claim, oh yeah, we got this evidence from this subpoena. That's the issue. And then the other overarching issue that Judge Lyman is inevitably going to have to figure out is he understands the relevance of why they're asking for what they're asking for. He compelled these communications from Van Zandt because he says that it's relevant to whether or not you fraudulently obtained this evidence. Point blank, and you can't argue otherwise. And then he made some other rulings, but he said that, look, they've made an argument that you fraudulently concealed something and tried to launder evidence and use it for gain in this lawsuit, and so therefore it's relevant. We're compelling it. Now, what the Baldoni parties are essentially saying, or the Wayfarer parties are now saying, or what they're tipping us off on, is they are preparing a further or future motion related to these communications, where I think that they're probably going to come after them for abusive process or some other remedy, like making those communications inadmissible at trial or something to that effect. Worst case scenario for them, for the Lively parties, it's going to be an abusive process cause of action, an independent cause of action. But that's what Friedman is going to have to decide. If he just lets it go and he doesn't penalize the Lively parties at all for anything that's gone down, it's going to set a wild precedent in the Second Circuit about how you can maneuver in the court system to obtain evidence in these various shady ways. Oh yeah, just file a lawsuit. You don't have to name anybody. You don't have to notify anybody, and then you'll get whatever.
Right. Well, just like further celebrities, all they have to do is create a fake corporation and then start anonymously subpoenaing people for phones.
Right.
It's a huge invasion of privacy. So that's, I guess,
As the next court session began, the tension from the previous day still lingered in the air. Spectators filed in early, journalists checked their recorders twice, and the energy in the courtroom was electric. No one could predict what the judge would say next, but everyone knew something was coming, and then it happened. Halfway through the defense's argument, the judge interrupted, firmly, sharply. "Counsel, before we proceed any further, this court requires an explanation." The room fell completely silent. Everyone turned their eyes toward the bench. The judge continued, holding up a document that had become the centerpiece of the controversy. The subpoena Blake's team denied existed. "Why did your office tell this court and opposing counsel that this subpoena was fictitious?" The judge's tone was direct. There was no room for interpretation. The defense scrambled, citing administrative errors and vague misunderstandings. But the judge wasn't buying it. "This isn't a filing error," they said. "This was a categorical denial of a valid court-issued document. That is not acceptable." Blake Lively sat frozen. Her usual calm expression was replaced by visible anxiety. She glanced around the room, then down at her hands. It was as if the weight of the moment had finally hit her. Her lawyer, visibly flustered, asked for a recess, but the judge denied it. This court operates on facts, not fiction. Let me be clear, any further misrepresentation, intentional or otherwise, will result in immediate sanction or contempt proceedings. The judge then paused, making direct eye contact with the lead defense attorney. That includes you, counselor. The gallery erupted in whispers. Reporters began typing furiously. Outside, the news spread like wildfire. Tweets referenced the exchange as career-ending, a meltdown, and even Blake's legal reckoning. YouTube commentators reacted in real time, splicing together past statements from Blake's lawyer with the judge's new warning. It wasn't just a legal embarrassment, it was public. And for Blake Lively, this wasn't just a tough day in court, it was a breaking point. Her team had lost the court's trust, and possibly
has Friedman,
its
I guess
patience.
that's where I'm lost. Has Friedman taken that next step? Where are we currently in the case, and what needs to happen for this to be even more carefully looked at?
Well, I think that he needs to get the communications first. I don't know if he's received them yet or not. I know they've been compelled. Once he have those,
right, that was a win for Team Judge. Right, the judge did reveal, yes, you must give this information over.
Yes, there's no argument that you could withhold him. And so, yes, he's got that information. The next step is to figure out what specific communications were obtained via that subpoena. Step 2 is run an analysis of whether or not any of those were illegally obtained. How deep into her personal communications did they go, and how many hoops did they have to jump through to get to her personal stuff on a business phone? That, you know, they're arguing, well, if it was on a business phone, then we're entitled to see it because it's a business phone. That's going to be another argument. And then 3, they're going to have to figure out how to frame their next motion. Is this going to be basically an amended complaint based on abuse of process, or are they just going to make this an evidentiary motion, meaning whatever communications obtained through the subpoena, they want to be made inadmissible? And so they're framing all of that right now, and where that's inevitably going to lead is a future motion. When is it going to happen? Probably within the next month or 2, I would guess.
Right, and if that motion happens and the judge agrees that this was shady, there is a version where then those texts are inadmissible, which then throws the whole retaliation case off. So I imagine this must be on Friedman's radar and Justin's team to ensure they shoot that correctly, I would imagine, yes?
Yeah, no, I think this has been on his radar for a few months now. I mean, it really ever since we learned about the Van Sham thing.
Now, Lyman hasn't been very Team Justin, it seems. He's been giving Blake a lot of, where the deposition is going to happen. All this stuff keeps falling in. Are you noticing that? Even now as content creators, there's one, it just doesn't seem like he's being very friendly to anybody other than accommodating Blake. Are you seeing that too, or do you feel like he is being fair? What is your neutral perspective on that?
I feel where you would think that he's being, skewed towards the Lively side and unfair to the Friedman parties. But there has, a lot of that I think Friedman has brought upon himself through salacious PR drops that he's issued, the whole Exhibit A thing, the whole thing where he wrote a deposition basically accusing them of fraud, and that was on the docket, and it had to be removed from the docket. If you just subjectively look and take those 2 things out, and you look at how he's ruled on some of the discovery stuff, he's been pretty even-handed. It's not enough to say that he is favoring one side or the other just yet. I think that he's been pretty fair. I think that the Van Zandt ruling compelling that information was a big hit for the Lively parties, a huge hit for the Lively parties. And the whole deposition thing, I know people are up and learn, oh, this is not fair. She gets home field advantage. If I'm doing a deposition, I don't care if I got to do it at my office or I got to do it in your office. You're still going to face cross-examination. I'm still going to depose you. I don't care if I'm not sitting in my comfortable seat. Like, I'm there to do a job. And so you want home field advantage? Fine. And I think maybe from Friedman's perspectives, like, look, she's asking for these protective orders and this is gonna potentially lead to other stuff. We just need to get the deposition done. They're trying to run out the clock potentially. Just do it at your office. So now there's no more room for her to say that, hey, this is unfair. They're trying to take advantage of me. They're trying to beat up on me at their office. They're trying to plant people in the deposition to make me uncomfortable. Said, look, let's just make you as comfortable as possible. Now you have no more excuses. Do the effing deposition.
What had once seemed like a calculated, well-oiled legal machine was now in full collapse. Blake Lively's legal team had spent weeks attempting to discredit witnesses, redirect narratives, and drown the opposition in paperwork. But after the judge's rebuke, all of those tactics came back to haunt them. The cornerstone of their argument, that no subpoena existed, was shattered. And once that crumbled, the rest of their case began to unravel like a house of cards. Journalists started pulling records, YouTubers uploaded side-by-side timeline breakdowns, and legal analysts began openly criticizing Blake's defense. Suddenly, every delay, every vague filing, every redaction was under a microscope. Content creators like Andy Signor had been warning audiences for weeks. Now, they weren't just talking, they were showing proof. Screenshots of court documents, recordings of phone calls, and copies of verified subpoenas flooded the digital space. Blake's fans were left confused and disappointed, while her critics grew louder, more confident, and more organized. Even entertainment media outlets began shifting tone. Where once they defended her with fluff pieces and carefully worded coverage, now they asked tough questions. Did Blake Lively's lawyers lie to the judge? Is this the end of her Hollywood reign? Headlines no longer worked in her favor. Justin Baldoni, meanwhile, said nothing, and that silence worked like magic. With no dramatic press conferences or emotional posts, he let the truth speak for itself. And each time Blake's team tried to deny something, the receipts came out stronger. Legal insiders now speculated whether members of Blake's legal team would face consequences, not just in court, but with the state bar. Some whispered about internal disagreements within her camp. Rumors swirled that even some of her closest allies were backing away. In short, what had started as a strategy to protect her image had now done the exact opposite. The plan was broken, the trust was gone, and Blake Lively was on the defensive, with nowhere left to hide. Once the courtroom drama spilled into the public, Blake's team tried to pivot. They pushed out sympathetic narratives about how she was misunderstood, how the media was twisting the facts, how Justin's team was playing dirty. But the public didn't bite. Instead, hashtags like Blake Exposed and Justice for Justin began trending. Instagram fan pages removed their tributes. Twitter X exploded with users questioning everything about her public persona. "We were fooled," one viral tweet read. "She's not who we thought she was." YouTubers released hour-long deep dives, breaking down the case and dissecting the contradictions. Even gossip blogs known for playing it safe began posting side-by-sides of Blake's public statements versus courtroom transcripts. The result? A narrative collapse that no PR team could clean up. The impact didn't stop at social media. According to anonymous sources, several brands began reconsidering endorsement deals. One insider even told a popular entertainment site she's no longer seen as a safe bet. Movie studios, too, were rumored to be delaying or quietly dropping projects attached to her name. Meanwhile, Baldoni's profile continued to rise. Interviews he gave months ago about integrity and transparency were being reshared. Fans rallied around him, not just because they believed him, but because he stood firm without attacking back. Blake's silence, which once gave her an air of mystery, now read as guilt. People wanted answers, they wanted accountability, and they weren't getting it from her. This wasn't just a bad headline or a minor scandal. It was an identity crisis. The woman Hollywood once hailed as flawless was now under a microscope, and every piece of the puzzle painted a different picture. One filled with contradictions, calculated silence, and legal games that finally blew up in her face. In the wake of Blake's legal misfire, one group wasn't about to stay silent, the creators. People like Andy Signor, once brushed off by elite Hollywood lawyers, now stood at the center of a truth-telling wave. Armed with receipts, recordings, and raw determination, they weren't just exposing the missteps, they were rewriting the narrative. Andy's now infamous phone call to Blake's legal office became the turning point. He didn't just catch them off guard, he caught them lying, on tape. And while California's two-party consent law typically makes recordings tricky, Andy made sure to tell them up front. That single moment, where they acknowledged the recording but still denied the subpoena, became a smoking gun. Andy's move emboldened others. Smaller creators who had once hesitated to speak out now found the courage to step up. They dissected filings, tracked court activity, and exposed contradictions in real time. Legal professionals and viewers alike started sharing their content. In just weeks, what started as a few niche channels turned into a massive digital coalition. These creators weren't just creating videos, they were acting like investigative journalists, digging deeper than mainstream outlets. They exposed inconsistencies not only in court documents, but also in public statements made by Blake's representatives. Some even reached out to legal professionals for expert takes, turning their commentary into credible, fact-checked reporting. But it wasn't without risk. These creators were being subpoenaed too, some even accused in filings of targeted harassment and reputation attacks. That's when it clicked for many. This wasn't just about Blake Lively protecting her name. It was about using the court to silence dissent. Creators began calling it out loudly. They posted side-by-side comparisons of statements versus evidence, held live-stream discussions with legal experts, and created timelines to help viewers understand what was really going on. They weren't afraid anymore. They were furious. And the audience noticed. Subscriber counts soared. Comments flooded in with support. Viewers started donating to help creators handle legal fees. What began as isolated voices had transformed into a movement. A loud, organized, and unshakable movement demanding transparency and accountability. Andy put it best during one of his live streams. "You come for us with lies and subpoenas. We come back with truth and proof." Blake Lively may have walked into court expecting a victory, but what unfolded was a full-on collapse of credibility. Her team's strategy of denial, misdirection, and intimidation didn't just fail, it backfired. The judge's call-out, the creator's receipts, and the public's growing distrust have all added up to one unavoidable truth. Blake's carefully built image may never recover. This wasn't just about legal filings. It was about the public finally seeing behind the curtain. The ones who stood up, challenged the narrative, and demanded transparency weren't silenced. They were validated. And if there's one lesson from all of this, it's that truth, especially when backed by proof, will always find its way to the surface. And as this story continues to unfold, it's clear that the final word hasn't been spoken yet. But Blake's silence? That may have already said enough.